My daughter's voice message still echoes in my head. You're not flying with us. My husband didn't want. And then silence. Dead, cold silence that cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. What happened in the 2 hours after that call would teach them both a lesson they'd never forget. I sat in my garage, oil-stained hands trembling as I held that crumpled airline ticket. My first vacation in 3 years, destroyed by a 30-second voice message. Lauren's words played on repeat, each syllable like a knife. Dad, you don't understand their world. Her world now. Designer boots and million-dollar cattle operations. Too sophisticated for a widowed mechanic who raised her alone for 28 years. What my ungrateful daughter didn't realize was that this embarrassing old man in worn flannel shirts happened to own controlling stakes in the very companies that kept Morrison Ranch from bankruptcy. My name is Clinton Avery, and sometimes the people who look down on you are standing on ground you actually own. Those 2 hours were about to become the most expensive mistake of their lives. But before I tell you exactly what I did in that garage, let me ask, have you ever had your own family treat you like you were worthless? Share your story below and subscribe, because what happened next will leave you speechless. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. My name is Clinton Avery, and for 42 years I worked as an aircraft mechanic at Rocky Mountain Aviation in Colorado Springs. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd drive my old Ford pickup to the hangar, punch my time card, and spend 12 hours elbow deep in jet engines and hydraulic systems. Nothing glamorous about it, just honest work that paid the bills and kept planes in the sky. I married my high school sweetheart Maria when we were both 19. She was the prettiest girl in Jefferson County, smart as a whip, and for some reason she thought a grease monkey like me was worth her time. We had Lauren when Maria was 22, and from the moment that little girl opened her eyes, she became the center of our universe. But life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. When Lauren was 8, Maria started getting sick. Headaches at first, then dizzy spells, then something much worse. The doctors used words like aggressive and inoperable and 6 months, if we're lucky. Maria fought for 2 years, but cancer doesn't negotiate. I remember sitting in that hospital room, holding Maria's hand while she slept, and making her a promise. I'll take care of Lauren, I whispered. She'll never want for anything. She'll go to college. She'll have opportunities we never had. I swear it. Those medical bills nearly destroyed us. $340,000 in treatments, specialists, experimental procedures, everything insurance wouldn't cover. I took out every loan I could, maxed out credit cards, sold Maria's jewelry, but I would have sold my soul to give her one more day. After Maria passed, it was just Lauren and me in that little house on Maple Street. She was 10 years old, confused, angry at God, and me and the whole world. I worked double shifts when I could, picked up weekend jobs rebuilding engines for private pilots. Every extra penny went into Lauren's college fund. But here's what nobody knew, not even Lauren. During those long hours in the hangar, I'd been paying attention, watching how the aviation industry worked, learning which companies made the parts we couldn't live without. In 1985, I took my first $5,000 and bought stock in a small aerospace supplier called Pinnacle Aerospace Solutions. The guys at work laughed. Mechanics don't play the market, Clinton. They stopped laughing when Pinnacle landed a major government contract 2 years later. My $5,000 became $50,000. I reinvested every penny, bought more stock, learned everything I could about the business. By 1995, I owned 28% of Pinnacle Aerospace Solutions. The company that started in a garage was now supplying parts to Boeing and Lockheed Martin. I kept working at the hangar because I loved the work, but also because I needed cover. Nobody questions a mechanic driving an old pickup truck. Nobody assumes the guy in oil-stained coveralls has millions in investment accounts. I liked it that way. When the agricultural equipment boom hit in the early 2000s, I diversified. Bought into a company called Heartland Equipment Corp. When they were building their first factory in Nebraska. Farming was getting more technical, more computerized, just like aviation had 20 years earlier. I saw the same patterns, the same opportunities. By 2010, I owned 15% of Heartland Equipment Corp. They manufactured the tractors, combines, and irrigation systems that kept half the Midwest running. The irony wasn't lost on me. This grease monkey from Colorado was helping feed America. Lauren never knew about any of this. When she got accepted to Colorado State University, I told her I'd saved enough from overtime to cover tuition. When she wanted to study abroad in Ireland her junior year, I said we'd make it work. When she graduated summa cum laude with a degree in agricultural business, I was the proudest father in that stadium. She met Brandon Morrison at a young farmers conference in Denver. He was this confident, smooth-talking rancher from Texas who claimed his family owned 800 acres of prime cattle land. Lauren was smitten from day one. "Dad, he's everything I've ever wanted," she'd gush over the phone. "Successful, ambitious, from a real ranching family." I should have done my research then. Should have asked questions about Morrison Ranch, about their finances, about this young man who swept my daughter off her feet. But Lauren was happy, and after everything she'd been through losing her mother, I just wanted her to stay that way. The first red flag was Christmas dinner, 2019. Brandon came to Colorado Springs to meet me, and the moment he walked into my modest living room, I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He expected Lauren's father to be more sophisticated, more successful, more worthy of his attention. During dinner, he peppered me with questions that weren't really questions. "So, Clinton, still working on airplanes? That must be interesting work. Not much money in mechanics, though, I'd imagine." Lauren laughed nervously and changed the subject, but I caught the look that passed between them. After that, things started changing. Lauren's visits became less frequent. Phone calls got shorter. When she and Brandon got engaged in 2020, I offered to help pay for the wedding. "That's so sweet, Dad, but Brandon's family has it covered. They want something elegant." Elegant. Not the kind of wedding a mechanic could afford, apparently. The wedding was beautiful, I'll give them that. Held at some fancy resort in Austin, with more flowers than I'd seen in my lifetime, and a band that probably cost more than my annual salary. Brandon's family was polite but distant, making conversation about crops and cattle prices while carefully avoiding any mention of my profession. I danced with Lauren to Butterfly Kisses, the same song I'd sung to her as a little girl, and she whispered, "I love you, Dad. Thank you for everything." For a moment, it felt like we were back to being just us against the world. But even then, I could feel the distance growing. After the wedding, I did what I should have done years earlier. I investigated Morrison Ranch. What I found would have made Lauren sick if she'd known the truth. Morrison Ranch wasn't the generational success story Brandon painted. His grandfather had lost the original 2,000-acre spread in the 1980s farm crisis. Brandon's father bought back 400 acres in 1995 with leveraged loans, expanded to 800 acres by 2010. But the debt never went away. It just kept growing. When I pulled Morrison Ranch's financial records, something you can do when you own major stakes in agricultural lending companies, the picture became crystal clear. Total debt, $3.8 million. Annual revenue, $2.1 million. They were hemorrhaging money faster than a punctured oil line. Brandon had been living on borrowed time and borrowed money for years. The fancy trucks, the designer clothes, the lavish lifestyle, all financed through equipment loans, land mortgages, and operating credit that was about to come due. But here's where it gets interesting. In late 2020, Brandon applied for a massive expansion loan, $2.1 million, to buy adjacent land and modernize his operation. The bank required a co-signer with substantial assets, someone respectable, financially stable, with a proven track record. Through my attorneys, I had established the Maria Avery Trust. In 2018, named after my late wife, managed through a law firm in Denver. The trust held my Pinnacle Aerospace and Heartland Equipment shares, worth approximately $73 million total. To the outside world, the Maria Avery Trust was just another investment entity. Nobody connected it to Clinton Avery, aircraft mechanic. When Brandon's loan application crossed my desk, remember I had significant influence at several agricultural lenders. I made a decision that seemed generous at the time. The Maria Avery Trust would co-sign Brandon's loan. No questions asked, no family meetings required, just quiet support for my son-in-law's dreams. Brandon was over the moon. Lauren, honey, we got approved. Some trust fund liked our application so much, they backed the whole thing. We're going to be the biggest ranch in 3 counties. Lauren called me that night, so excited she could barely speak. Dad, Brandon got his expansion loan. Isn't that amazing? He's going to double the herd, buy the Henderson place, maybe even start that organic beef program he's been planning. I smiled and told her how proud I was. I didn't mention that her husband's success was built on her dead mother's name. The money flow was immediate and substantial. Morrison Ranch equipment purchases went through Heartland Equipment Corp., my company. When they needed specialized transport for cattle shipments, they used freight companies contracted with Pinnacle Aerospace. When they upgraded their irrigation systems, installed GPS guidance for tractors, bought new breeding stock, every major purchase somehow flowed through companies I controlled. Brandon thought he was a brilliant businessman. He'd bragged to Lauren about his industry connections and natural talent for negotiating great deals. What he didn't realize was that every supplier he worked with had received quiet instructions to give Morrison Ranch the best possible pricing and terms. I was subsidizing my son-in-law's ego without him knowing it, but the real insurance policy was the co-signature itself. The Maria Avery Trust wasn't just backing Brandon's loan. We held secondary interests in all his equipment purchases, land acquisitions, and operational improvements. If Morrison Ranch defaulted, the trust had legal claim to recover assets worth more than the outstanding debt. It was a safety net that could become a noose, depending on how you pulled it. During this time, I also quietly handled other family expenses. When Lauren mentioned wanting to update their house, I arranged for promotional pricing on construction materials through companies I influenced. When they took that anniversary trip to Hawaii, the resort gave them an unexpected upgrade that I'd paid for through shell companies. Lauren thought Brandon was providing an amazing lifestyle. Brandon thought he was earning it through his ranching skills. Neither realized that Clinton Avery, the embarrassing mechanic father, was orchestrating their entire financial reality. I kept detailed records of everything. Every loan guarantee, every subsidized purchase, every behind-the-scenes payment that made their lives possible. Not because I planned to use it against them, but because 40 years in aviation had taught me that documentation saves lives. You never know when you'll need to prove what really happened. The irony was perfect. Brandon Morrison, who looked down on working-class people, was being kept afloat by the ultimate working-class success story. The sophisticated rancher was financially dependent on a man he considered beneath his family's standards. And Lauren, my brilliant daughter who understood agricultural business better than most professionals, never questioned how her husband had become so successful so quickly. Love, I suppose, makes us believe in miracles. For 3 years, I watched this charade play out. Family gatherings where Brandon would hold forth about market timing and strategic investments, while I sat quietly in my flannel shirt, letting him take credit for successes I'd engineered. Holiday dinners where Lauren would beam with pride at her husband's accomplishments, never noticing how those accomplishments had materialized exactly when they needed them most. I told myself I was being a good father, providing for my daughter's happiness without bruising her husband's pride. Looking back, I realized I was enabling something much more dangerous. I was teaching them both that they could treat me with disrespect while living off my generosity. But that phone call from the airport gate changed everything. The disrespect started small, the way cancer does. Just tiny symptoms you tell yourself don't mean anything serious. Christmas 2021 was the first time I really noticed it. Lauren and Brandon drove up from Texas for their annual visit, pulling into my driveway in a brand new F-350 King Ranch edition, $75,000 worth of truck that Brandon made sure to mention had been a reward for our best year ever. We were having dinner at my kitchen table, the same scratched oak table where I'd helped Lauren with homework for 12 years, when Brandon started talking about their 5-year plan. "We're really moving into a different tier now," he said, cutting his steak with exaggerated precision. "The Morrison Ranch brand is becoming something special. Premium organic beef, direct sales to high-end restaurants in Dallas and Austin. We're talking about joining the Texas Cattle Ranchers Association. Very exclusive group." Lauren nodded enthusiastically. "It's amazing, Dad. Brandon's really building something impressive." Then Brandon looked across the table at me, that polite smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Clinton, you should be proud. Your daughter married well. Lauren's going places she never would have reached on a mechanic's income." The words hung in the air like exhaust fumes. Lauren's face went red, but she didn't contradict him, didn't defend the man who'd raised her, who'd worked double shifts to pay for her education, who'd sat through every parent-teacher conference and soccer game and college graduation ceremony alone. "Brandon," she said quietly, "Dad did his best." Did his best. Like I was some charity case who'd barely managed to keep her fed and clothed. I swallowed my response with my dinner and changed the subject. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Brandon's casual dismissal of everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed. "Your daughter married well," as if marrying him had saved her from a life of poverty and embarrassment. Easter 2022 was worse. They didn't come to Colorado at all. Instead, Lauren called on Easter Sunday to explain that they were spending the holiday with Brandon's extended family at the ranch. "It's become a real tradition," she said, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "All the Morrison cousins and their families. It's like a reunion every year." "What about our tradition?" I asked. For 20 years, even after Maria died, Lauren and I had colored Easter eggs together. She'd insist on it through high school, through college, even the first year she was married. "Oh, Dad, we're too old for Easter eggs. Besides, Brandon's family does this whole formal brunch thing. Very elegant." Elegant. That word was becoming Lauren's favorite, and it always meant the same thing. Not like Dad. But the real turning point was Lauren's birthday last September. She turned 34 on September 15th, and for 33 years I'd never missed celebrating with her. Even when she was in college, even when she studied abroad, I'd found a way to mark the day. This time I drove down to Texas. 6 hours each way, but I wanted to surprise her with the wooden jewelry box I'd been crafting in my garage. Solid cherry wood with dovetail joints and her initials hand-carved on the lid. I'd spent 3 months getting it perfect. When I arrived at Morrison Ranch, the house was full of people I didn't recognize. Expensive cars in the driveway, women in designer dresses, men in those crisp Western shirts that cost more than I made in a week. Through the window, I could see Lauren laughing at something someone had said, wearing a dress I'd never seen before and jewelry that definitely hadn't come from a mechanic's budget. I knocked on the front door, jewelry box under my arm, expecting Lauren to be surprised and delighted like she'd been every year before. Instead, she opened the door and her face went pale. "Dad, what are you—" "We weren't expecting you." Behind her, the conversation had stopped. I could feel a dozen pairs of eyes evaluating my appearance. Work boots, jeans, the flannel shirt Lauren had given me for Christmas 3 years earlier. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, holding out the jewelry box. "I made this for you." Lauren took the box, but didn't open it. That's very sweet, Dad, but we're kind of in the middle of a party. Brandon's business partners are here and..." "And what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Brandon appeared behind her, drink in hand, smile nowhere to be found. "Clinton, good to see you. Wish we'd known you were coming. We would have suggested maybe next weekend instead." "It's my daughter's birthday," I said. "Of course it is. And we're celebrating with some important clients. Nothing personal, you understand. But business is business." Lauren wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, maybe you could come back next month? When things are less complicated?" Complicated. I was her father, and my presence at her birthday party was complicated. I drove 6 hours home that night, stopping twice because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the steering wheel steady. The jewelry box sat on my passenger seat, unopened, rejected like everything else I'd tried to give my daughter. That's when I started paying closer attention to their social media posts. Lauren's Instagram was full of pictures I was never in: fancy dinners, weekend trips, family gatherings with the Morrison clan. Brandon's Facebook showed a successful rancher living his best life, surrounded by attractive, successful people who understood his elevated lifestyle. In December, they posted pictures from their Christmas celebration at the ranch. Extended Morrison family, business associates, even their veterinarian and his wife. Everyone dressed like they were attending a country club gala. Everyone smiling like they belonged in Brandon's sophisticated world. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even mentioned. Instead, I got a phone call on Christmas Eve. "Dad, we're going to stay in Texas for the holidays. Brandon's family has this amazing tradition. Amazing traditions that didn't include the man who'd created all their Christmas traditions for the first 28 years of Lauren's life." That's when I realized what was happening. I wasn't just being excluded from events, I was being edited out of Lauren's life entirely, airbrushed out like an embarrassing mistake, replaced by the Morrison family mythology where everything sophisticated and successful had started with Brandon. But I still didn't act. I still told myself this was a phase, that Lauren would remember who she really was, that love would eventually triumph over social climbing. I was wrong. The final straw came 3 weeks ago when Lauren called with amazing news. "Dad, we're planning this incredible family vacation to Morrison's cousin's ranch in Montana. 5 families, 10 days of horseback riding and gourmet meals. It's going to be like a Western movie." "Sounds wonderful," I said. "When do we leave?" Silence. Then, "Oh, Dad, this is really more for... It's couples and families. Married people. You'd feel out of place." I'd feel out of place at a family vacation with my own daughter. That conversation ended with Lauren promising we'd plan something special just for us later in the year. Something special that never happened, never got scheduled, never became more than words meant to make her feel better about excluding her father. But what she didn't realize was that her latest exclusion had given me crucial information. The Montana ranch trip was expensive, $15,000 per family, plus travel costs. Money that Brandon definitely didn't have, given Morrison Ranch's current debt situation. That night, I checked Morrison Ranch's latest loan applications. Sure enough, Brandon had requested another $50,000 in operating credit, supposedly for equipment maintenance and seasonal expenses. He was borrowing money to pay for a luxury vacation while excluding the man whose companies were keeping his ranch solvent. That's when I started making plans. The call came on a Thursday morning while I was rebuilding a carburetor in my garage. My phone rang and Lauren's name appeared on the screen with that photo I'd taken of her at last year's Christmas, the last Christmas we'd spent together. "Hey, sweetheart," I answered, wiping my hands on an old shop rag. "Dad." Her voice was tight, nervous. "I need to tell you something about this weekend." My heart actually lifted for a moment. Maybe she'd changed her mind about the Montana trip. Maybe she'd remembered that vacations weren't really vacations without the people you loved most. "What's up?" "Well, we're flying out to Montana tomorrow for that ranch gathering I mentioned, and I know you were hoping to maybe join us, but..." I wasn't hoping anything. She'd already made it clear I wasn't welcome, but I let her continue. "The thing is, Dad, this is really important for Brandon's business. He's meeting with some major investors, people who might partner with us on expanding the operation. First impressions matter a lot in this world." "Okay," I said carefully. "What does that have to do with me?" The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. "Dad, these people, they're very successful, very sophisticated. They expect a certain level of social polish. And you're wonderful, but you're not really..." "I'm not really what, Lauren?" "You're not really their type of people." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been practicing them. "You work with your hands, you live simply, and that's beautiful in its own way, but these folks are different. They drive Mercedes and talk about international markets and..." "Oh God, Dad, I'm saying this all wrong." No, she was saying it exactly right. I was an embarrassment. a liability, a problem to be managed. So you don't want me to come to Montana, I said. It's not that I don't want you there. It's just that Brandon thinks it would be better if this trip was just the core families. People who understand the business, who can contribute to the conversations about future investments. I could contribute plenty to conversations about agricultural investments, but Lauren didn't know that. She thought her father was just a retired mechanic with grease under his fingernails and nothing interesting to say. I understand, I told her, though I didn't understand anything anymore. You do? Oh, Dad, thank you for being so reasonable about this. I was worried you'd be upset. Upset. What a small word for what was happening in my chest. Have a great trip, I said, and hung up before I could say something I'd regret. But that wasn't the end of it. That wasn't even close to the end. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Lauren had posted a group photo from the airport. All 5 couples standing in front of their gate, designer luggage at their feet, everyone smiling like they were heading off to conquer the world. The caption read, "Montana Adventure Begins. So grateful to be surrounded by such amazing, successful families. The Morrison Ranch crew is ready to talk serious business with serious people. Hashtag ranch life, dash business trip, bless that. Serious people." I stared at those words until they blurred. But even that wasn't the worst part. As the day went on, the posts kept coming. Pictures from the airplane, pictures from the Montana ranch, pictures of gourmet meals and horseback riding, and beautiful mountain scenery. And every single post emphasized the same theme: how exclusive this group was, how successful, how far above ordinary people they had risen. Then came the Facebook Live video that changed everything. It was Saturday evening, and they were having what Lauren called a celebration dinner around a massive outdoor fire pit. Everyone was a little drunk, a little loose with their words, and apparently feeling very comfortable with each other. I watched Brandon stand up with his beer raised high, his voice carrying clearly through my phone speaker. "I want to make a toast," he announced, "to the most incredible group of families I've ever had the privilege of knowing. We've all worked hard to get where we are, and we deserve to celebrate with people who understand what real success looks like." Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. Lauren was beaming up at her husband, pride radiating from every pixel of the video. And I especially want to thank my beautiful wife Lauren for understanding that sometimes you have to make hard choices about who belongs in your life. She could have insisted on bringing certain family members who don't quite fit our lifestyle, but she knows that success means surrounding yourself with other successful people. The camera panned across the faces around the fire, all nodding in agreement. These were people who understood that ordinary folks just didn't belong in their rarefied world. "So here's to the Morrison Ranch family," Brandon continued, "and to leaving the past behind us." "Hear, hear," someone shouted, and everyone drank deeply. But Brandon wasn't finished. He was drunk on expensive whiskey and social acceptance, and he kept talking. "You know, folks, there's something liberating about finally being able to be honest about who we are and where we come from. Lauren's been carrying the burden of her humble beginnings for too long. Her father's a sweet old man, don't get me wrong, but he's just a mechanic. Works on airplanes, gets grease under his fingernails, drives a truck that's older than some of our kids." Her laughter rippled around the fire, actually laughing at my life, my work, my character. But Lauren's evolved beyond all that. She's Morrison Ranch royalty now, and she deserves to spend her time with people who can appreciate her intelligence and sophistication. Not stuck making small talk with some old-timer who thinks fine dining means Applebee's. The laughter got louder. Someone made a joke about blue-collar wisdom, and everyone thought it was hilarious. Lauren was laughing too. My daughter, who I'd raised alone for 18 years, who I'd supported through college and career struggles and heartbreak, was laughing while her husband mocked the man who'd given her everything. "Poor old Clinton probably thinks we're all just regular folks like him," Brandon said. "He has no idea that this group represents millions of dollars in agricultural holdings and business connections. Probably thinks we get together to discuss truck maintenance and fishing." More laughter. More drinks. More casual cruelty directed at a man who wasn't there to defend himself. But here's the thing about Facebook Live, it reaches everyone on your friends list, including the people you've forgotten are watching, including the fathers you've just publicly humiliated. I sat in my garage watching my daughter laugh while her husband destroyed my dignity for entertainment and felt something fundamental change inside my chest. Not heartbreak, that would have been easier. This was colder, cleaner. This was the death of illusion. I turned off the video and sat in the silence of my garage, surrounded by tools that had built a life, supported a family, and earned an honest living for 4 decades. Tools that Brandon Morrison thought were symbols of failure. Then I walked to my basement office and opened the file cabinet where I kept records of everything I'd done to support Morrison Ranch. Every loan guarantee, every behind-the-scenes subsidy, every quiet intervention that had made their success possible. It was time for some education. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't even try. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold hours ago, staring at my laptop screen and making lists. Not angry lists. Anger makes you sloppy, and I couldn't afford to be sloppy. These were precise, methodical lists of facts and actions, written in the same careful handwriting I'd used to log aircraft maintenance for 4 decades. List 1. Every financial connection between my companies and Morrison Ranch. List 2. Every loan, guarantee, and behind-the-scenes support I'd provided. List 3. The legal mechanisms that could be triggered with a simple phone call. By 3 a.m., I had a clear picture of exactly how much power I held over the people who thought I was powerless. It was more than I'd realized, accumulated over years of quiet generosity that had never been acknowledged or appreciated. But this wasn't about revenge. Revenge is emotional, messy, destructive. This was about education, about teaching 2 adults that actions have consequences and disrespect has a price. I thought about Maria, about the promise I'd made to take care of Lauren no matter what. I'd kept that promise for 28 years, even when taking care of her meant enabling her husband's arrogance and my own humiliation. But Maria wouldn't have wanted Lauren to become the kind of person who laughs while someone mocks her father. Maria wouldn't have wanted me to enable cruelty in the name of love. The woman I married had respected hard work, honest dealing, and family loyalty above everything else. She would have been horrified by what Lauren had become under Brandon's influence. At sunrise, I called my attorney. Richard, it's Clinton Avery. I need to exercise some options we've discussed. Richard Hawkins had been handling my business affairs for 15 years. He knew about the trust structures, the anonymous holdings, the web of financial relationships that connected my simple lifestyle to my complex business empire. He'd always been discreet, professional, and very expensive. What kind of options, Clinton? The Morrison Ranch guarantees. I want them terminated. All of them. A pause. That's significant. Are you sure? Completely sure. Draft the legal notifications for First National Bank, Heritage Equipment Financing, and Agri-Credit Solutions. Inform them that the Maria Avery Trust is withdrawing all loan guarantees and collateral backing for Morrison Ranch operations, effective immediately. Clinton, that will trigger immediate payment calls on approximately $6 million in outstanding debt. Morrison Ranch doesn't have that kind of liquidity. I know exactly what it will trigger. Another pause. This is about your daughter, isn't it? Richard had met Lauren a few times over the years. He'd seen her at charity events where I made anonymous donations, watched her charm rooms full of people who had no idea her father was the major contributor keeping their organizations afloat. This is about accountability, I said. How quickly can you have the paperwork ready? By noon today, if you're certain this is what you want. I'm certain. I spent the morning in my garage, not working on anything in particular, just being surrounded by tools and machinery that made sense. Everything in my garage had a purpose, a function, a reason for existing. Unlike the family relationships that had apparently become performances designed to exclude the man who made them possible. At noon, Richard called back. Documents are ready. I'm emailing them to you for electronic signature. Then I'll file them with the appropriate institutions. Are you prepared for the consequences? I've been prepared for 40 years. I signed the documents on my laptop, watching my name appear in digital ink next to terms like guarantee termination and collateral withdrawal and immediate payment required. Legal language that would transform my son-in-law's life from comfortable success to desperate scrambling in a matter of hours. But I wasn't finished. The second call was to James Morrison, president of Heartland Equipment Corp. And no relation to Brandon despite the name. James had been running day-to-day operations for my equipment company since I'd taken a controlling interest in 2003. James, I need all purchase agreements and leasing contracts with Morrison Ranch terminated immediately. Exercise the standard 30-day equipment recovery clauses. Sir, that's a significant account. They've got nearly $500,000 in equipment on lease through us. Is there a payment issue? There's a relationship issue. I want every piece of Heartland equipment removed from Morrison Ranch property within 30 days. No exceptions, no payment plans, no negotiations. Understood. I'll begin recovery proceedings this afternoon. The third call was to Patricia Valdez at Pinnacle Aerospace Solutions, specifically to our freight and logistics division. Patricia, I need all shipping and transport contracts with Morrison Ranch canceled immediately. Mr. Avery, they've got cattle shipments scheduled through the end of the year. If we cancel now, they'll have no way to get their product to market. Then they'll need to find alternative transportation. Sir, that could bankrupt their operation. Patricia, that's not our concern anymore. By 2 p.m., I had systematically removed every pillar of support that had been keeping Morrison Ranch profitable. The same quiet efficiency I'd used to build their success was now dismantling it with surgical precision. I poured another cup of coffee and sat back down at my kitchen table to wait for the phone calls that would inevitably come. I didn't have to wait long. The first call came at 3:47 p.m. I was in my garage, pretending to organize my toolbox, while actually listening for my phone to ring. When it finally did, the caller ID showed First National Bank, Commercial Lending. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Clinton Avery. Mr. Avery, this is David Chen from First National. I'm calling about some documents we received today regarding the Morrison Ranch accounts. What about them? Well, sir, according to our records, the Maria Avery Trust has been guaranteeing several significant loans for Morrison Ranch operations. The documents we received today indicate that guarantee is being withdrawn immediately. That's correct. Mr. Avery, I'm not sure you understand the implications. Without that guarantee, Morrison Ranch has insufficient collateral to cover their outstanding debt. We're talking about $3.8 million in primary loans, plus $2.1 million in the recent expansion financing. I understand perfectly. A long pause. Sir, this will trigger immediate payment demands on the full amount. Morrison Ranch will have 30 days to either provide alternative collateral or pay off the entire debt. I'm aware of the terms. Mr. Avery, forgive me for asking, but is there some kind of dispute here? Because if this is a family matter that can be resolved, this is a business decision, Mr. Chen. The Maria Avery Trust is exercising its contractual rights to withdraw guarantees. Nothing more, nothing less. I see. Well, I'll need to contact Mr. Morrison immediately to inform him of the situation. You do that. I hung up and went back to organizing tools I'd organized a dozen times before. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Heritage Equipment Financing. The conversation was almost identical. Polite confusion, explanations of dire consequences, gentle suggestions that perhaps this was all a misunderstanding. I gave the same responses, signed the same electronic documents, and terminated another pillar of support. Agri Credit Solutions called an hour later with the same script. By 5 p.m., I had officially withdrawn approximately $6 million in loan guarantees from a ranch that grossed $2.1 million annually in good years. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Dad, what the hell is happening? Lauren's voice was shrill, panicked, barely recognizable. In the background, I could hear Brandon shouting at someone, his words too muffled to make out, but his tone unmistakably furious. I'm not sure what you mean, sweetheart. Don't you dare sweetheart me. Brandon just got off the phone with 3 different banks, and they're all saying the same thing. Someone withdrew loan guarantees for the ranch. $6 million worth. They want everything paid back in 30 days, or they're starting foreclosure proceedings. That sounds stressful. Stressful? Dad, this could destroy us. We don't have $6 million lying around. The ranch is our entire livelihood, our home, everything we've built together. Everything they'd built. If she only knew how literally accurate that statement was. I'm sure Brandon will figure something out, I said. He's a successful businessman with lots of important connections. This isn't a joke. Whoever did this knows exactly how much damage it would cause. The bank said the guarantees came from something called the Maria Avery Trust. Dad, that's Mom's name. Do you know anything about this? I might know a little something about it. Silence. Then quietly, what do you mean? I mean the Maria Avery Trust is something I established years ago to manage certain investments. And yesterday, after watching your husband publicly humiliate me for the entertainment of his friends, I decided those investments should no longer support Morrison Ranch. You did this? I'm the one who's been keeping Brandon's ranch profitable for 3 years, yes. I'm also the one who co-signed his expansion loan, subsidized his equipment purchases, and arranged favorable contracts with his suppliers. All through companies and trusts you never bothered to learn about. I could hear her breathing, sharp and shallow, like she was having trouble processing what I was telling her. That's impossible. You're a mechanic. You don't have that kind of money. Lauren, I've been investing in aerospace and agricultural companies for 35 years. I currently own controlling interests in Pinnacle Aerospace Solutions and Heartland Equipment Corp. My total holdings are worth approximately $73 million. $73 million. Your college tuition? Paid from investment dividends? Your wedding? Anonymous gift from the trust? Brandon's equipment leases, transport contracts, even his insurance policies, all arranged through companies I control. Morrison Ranch isn't successful because your husband is brilliant. It's successful because I've been supporting it from behind the scenes. Silence. Then the sound of sobbing. Dad, I don't understand. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to value hard work and honest living. I wanted you to respect people for their character, not their bank accounts. Apparently I failed on both counts. But if you have all that money, why do you live like what? Like a normal person? Because that's what I am, Lauren. The money doesn't change who I am or what I believe in. I'm still the same man who changed your diapers and taught you to ride a bicycle and worked overtime to pay for your school clothes. Then why are you doing this to us? The question hung between us like a loaded weapon. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply stopping doing things for you. There's a difference. Dad, please. I know what Brandon said was wrong, but he was drunk, and he meant every word. And more importantly, you sat there and laughed while he said it. I was drunk too. I wasn't thinking clearly. Lauren, being drunk doesn't change who you are. It just reveals who you are when you think no one important is watching. In the background, I could hear Brandon's voice getting louder, more desperate. Sounds like the phone calls from his creditors were beginning. Dad, if you stop this now, if you put the guarantees back, I swear we'll make it right. We'll apologize, we'll include you in everything, You'll what? Pretend to respect me? Fake appreciation for my contributions? Include me in gatherings where I'm the token, blue-collar grandfather who should be grateful for the invitation? It won't be pretending. I love you, Dad. I've always loved you. Love isn't a feeling, Lauren. It's a decision you make every day about how to treat people. And for the last 3 years, you've decided to treat me like an embarrassment you had to manage rather than a father who deserved respect. But we can fix this. We can change. Maybe you can, but not on my dime and not on my ranch. Your ranch? I hadn't meant to say that, but now that it was out there, I might as well finish the thought. The Morrison Ranch expansion was financed entirely through the Maria Avery Trust. The equipment, the additional land, the improvements, all purchased with loans I guaranteed. When those loans go into default, the trust has legal claim to recover assets equal to the outstanding debt. You're going to take our ranch? I'm going to let the banks take your ranch. There's a difference, though I suppose the end result is the same. Lauren was crying again, but softer now, defeated. Dad, please. I know we've been awful to you, but don't destroy our entire life over it. I'm not destroying anything, sweetheart. I'm just stopping the preservation of something that was built on disrespect and sustained by dishonesty. If your life falls apart when I withdraw my support, maybe that says something about the foundation it was built on. What do you want from us? The question I'd been asking myself for 3 years. I want you to understand that every person deserves basic dignity, regardless of their profession or their social status. I want you to remember that your success isn't always about your own brilliance. Sometimes it's about support systems you take for granted. And I want you to think about what kind of person you become when you can laugh while someone mocks the man who raised you. And if we learn those lessons, if we change, will you help us then? I don't know, Lauren. Right now, I'm not even sure I want to. I hung up before she could respond, before I could weaken and start enabling their disrespect all over again. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting my garage in golden light that made everything look peaceful and simple. I sat in Maria's old rocking chair, the one I'd brought out here after she died because I couldn't bear to see it empty in the living room, and listened to my phone ring again and again. I didn't answer. I'd said everything I needed to say. Now it was time to see what they'd learned. I spent the next 3 days packing my life into boxes, but not the way most people pack. I wasn't moving to another house in the same town, or even another town in the same state. I was disappearing. The house on Maple Street had been my home for 32 years. Maria and I had bought it when Lauren was 2, spent weekends painting rooms and planting gardens, and building the life we thought would last forever. After Maria died, I'd stayed because Lauren needed stability, needed to know her childhood home would always be there. But Lauren didn't need that stability anymore. She had Morrison Ranch, designer clothes, and sophisticated friends who understood her elevated lifestyle. She'd made it clear that her childhood home was just another embarrassment from her past. So I sold it, not through a realtor, not with signs in the yard or open houses that might attract attention. I sold it through an investment company to a cash buyer who didn't ask questions about why I wanted a quick, quiet sale. The new owners would take possession in 2 weeks, which gave me just enough time to sort through 3 decades of memories. I kept the important things: Maria's jewelry, Lauren's baby pictures, the wooden toy chest I'd built when she was 5. Everything else went to charity or the dumpster, including furniture that Lauren had grown up with but never bothered to visit anymore. The hardest part was cleaning out Lauren's old bedroom. She'd left most of her high school and college stuff behind when she moved to Texas, assuming it would always be there waiting for her. Honor Society certificates, volleyball trophies, the quilt her grandmother had made for her 16th birthday, all the artifacts of a childhood she'd apparently outgrown. I packed it all carefully into plastic storage containers and arranged for a moving company to deliver it to Morrison Ranch with a note. Thought you might want these pieces of your past. Dad. Then I started making arrangements to disappear. The cabin in Montana had been an investment property for 6 years, purchased through the same trust structures that Brandon had never bothered to research. 40 acres of pine forest and mountain silence, with a 2-bedroom log cabin that had electricity, but no internet, cell service, or connection to the world I was leaving behind. I'd told myself I bought it for retirement, but now I realized I'd bought it for escape. The utilities at the Colorado Springs house were transferred to the new owners. My mail was redirected to a post office box in Denver that I'd never visit. My cell phone was canceled, my social media accounts deleted, my Colorado voter registration terminated. Clinton Avery, aircraft mechanic, ceased to exist in any way that could be traced or contacted. I kept only the business holdings. They were managed through Richard's law firm anyway, generating income I never spent, and dividends that quietly supported charities I'd never visit. The Maria Avery Trust would continue its work, but its creator would be as anonymous as a ghost. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after Lauren's panicked phone call, I loaded my pickup truck with the few possessions that mattered and drove away from the only home Lauren had ever known. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't tell the neighbors where I was going. I simply locked the door behind me and started driving north, toward mountains and silence, and a life where I wouldn't have to pretend that love was enough to excuse disrespect. The drive took 12 hours, counting stops for gas and the meal I couldn't taste. I arrived at the Montana cabin after dark, unpacked by lamplight, and fell asleep in a bed that no one could find, even if they wanted to look for me. I woke the next morning to complete silence. No traffic, no neighbors, no phones ringing with desperate apologies or angry demands. Just wind through pine trees and the sound of a creek I couldn't see but could hear running somewhere beyond my property line. For the first time in 3 years, I felt peaceful. My phone had been buzzing constantly during the drive. Lauren calling, Brandon calling, even some numbers I didn't recognize. But cell service ended about 30 miles before my turnoff, which meant the outside world simply couldn't reach me anymore. I spent that first morning walking my property, relearning what quiet felt like. The cabin was simple but well built, with a stone fireplace, a kitchen equipped for basic cooking, and windows that looked out on nothing but forest and sky. No neighbors to judge my truck, no social expectations to navigate, no family members to disappoint with my working-class existence. That afternoon, I drove into the nearest town, population 847, to buy groceries and supplies. The clerk at the general store was a woman about my age who called me Hun and didn't ask where I was from or what I did for a living. She seemed genuinely pleased to have a new face in the store, and when I mentioned I'd bought the old Carlson place, she just nodded and said, "Pretty spot. Peaceful." Peaceful. When was the last time anyone had used that word to describe my life? I bought basic supplies, few tools to maintain the cabin, and a bottle of bourbon for evenings when the silence felt too complete. Then I drove back to my hidden life and began learning how to exist without family obligations, social expectations, or the constant weight of other people's disappointment. The first week was harder than I'd expected, not because I missed the conflict, but because I missed the hope that things might get better. For 3 years, I'd told myself that Lauren would eventually remember who she really was, that Brandon's influence would fade, that love would eventually triumph over social climbing. Now, sitting on my cabin porch with nothing but forest for company, I realized that hope had been keeping me prisoner as much as love had. I was finally free. I learned about the consequences through a series of phone calls I never answered and voicemail messages I eventually listened to, weeks after they were left. The first message was from Lauren, recorded 3 days after our last conversation. Her voice was hollow, defeated in a way I'd never heard before. "Dad, I know you won't answer, but I need to tell you what's happening. The bank foreclosed on the ranch yesterday. Everything happened so fast. 1 week we were planning expansion, and now we're losing everything we worked for. Brandon's been trying to find alternative financing, but no one will touch us without the kind of collateral we don't have. We have 30 days to vacate the property." A pause, then softer. "I keep thinking about that Facebook Live video, about what Brandon said and how I just sat there. I've watched it probably 100 times, trying to understand how I became the kind of person who would let someone mock my father for entertainment. I don't recognize myself in that video, Dad. I don't like who I see." The second message came from Brandon himself, recorded 5 days later. His tone was different, not apologetic, but desperate in a way that suggested he was finally understanding the scope of what had happened. "Clinton, this is Brandon. I know you're angry, and I know you have every right to be. What I said about you was inexcusable. I was showing off, trying to impress people who don't matter, and I hurt the one man who's been keeping my ranch alive." Another pause, then, "Lauren told me about the companies, about the Maria Avery Trust, about everything you've been doing behind the scenes. I had no idea. I thought I was building something on my own, but I was just the front man for your success. And I repaid that by mocking you in public." His voice cracked slightly. "We're losing everything, Clinton. The house, the land, the cattle, all the equipment. Lauren's heartbroken, and I know it's my fault. If there's any way to make this right, any way to earn back your respect and support, please tell me what that would look like. But the call that really got to me was Lauren's third message, left 2 weeks after they'd been forced to move out of Morrison Ranch. Dad, I'm calling from a motel in Austin. We had to sell everything we could and use the money to pay immediate debts, but it wasn't nearly enough. Brandon's looking for work, but his reputation in the ranching community is, well, word travels fast in agricultural circles. Everyone knows Morrison Ranch failed, and they all want to know why. She was crying now, trying to control it, but not quite succeeding. I've been doing a lot of thinking about who I was before I married Brandon, about the values you taught me, about what's really important in life. I remembered something from when I was 12. You'd been working extra shifts to save money for a vacation, and Mrs. Henderson next door made some comment about how we weren't that kind of family who took fancy trips. You could have told her about the money you'd saved, could have defended our family's worth, but instead you just smiled and said, "She's right. We're not that kind of family. We're the kind that works hard and takes care of each other." A long pause. I became that kind of family, Dad, the kind that judges people by their possessions and their social status, the kind that throws around money to buy respect instead of earning it through character. I'm so ashamed of who I became. The fourth message was different. Lauren's voice was steadier, more resolved. Dad, I don't know where you are, but I hope you're somewhere peaceful. I hope you're somewhere you feel valued and respected, because you deserve that. Brandon and I are starting over, really starting over. We moved to a small town outside San Antonio where no one knows our story. Brandon got a job at a feed store, and I'm working at the local agricultural extension office. It's honest work, the kind you taught me to respect. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We're learning what it means to live within our means, to work for what we have instead of borrowing against what we hope to achieve someday. It's humbling, but it's also cleaner, somehow, more honest. I think you'd approve of how we're living now, even if you can't forgive how we lived before. The most recent message was just 5 days old when I finally listened to it. Dad, I've been trying to find you for 3 months. I know you sold the house. I drove by and there's a new family living there. The neighbors said you just disappeared one day without telling anyone where you were going. I've called everyone I could think of, but no one knows where you are. Her voice was steadier now, but tinged with something that might have been acceptance. I think I understand why you left. Not just because of what we did, but because staying would have meant continuing to enable our bad behavior. You tried to teach us respect by example, but we didn't learn, so you taught us respect by consequences instead. A long breath. Brandon and I have been talking about what we'd say to you if we could find you. We want to apologize, obviously, but more than that, we want to thank you. Not for the money, though God knows we're grateful for the years of support we took for granted. We want to thank you for stopping that support when it stopped helping and started hurting us. Another pause. We needed to fail, Dad. We needed to lose everything we thought made us successful so we could remember what actual success looks like. It looks like integrity. It looks like hard work and honest dealing and treating people with respect regardless of their circumstances. It looks like you. The final part of the message was barely a whisper. I know you might not want us back in your life. I know trust, once broken, doesn't automatically heal just because the breaker is sorry. But if you ever decide you want to try again, we'll be different people than the ones who hurt you. We'll be the kind of people you can be proud of again. She left her new phone number and address, then hung up. I saved that message and deleted all the others. Then I sat on my porch, watching sunset paint the mountains in colors that had no names, and thought about forgiveness and second chances, and whether love could survive the complete destruction of everything it had originally built. I didn't know the answers yet, but for the first time in months, I was willing to consider the questions. I've been living in these Montana mountains for 8 months now, and I've learned something important about peace. It's not the absence of conflict, It's the presence of authenticity. For the first time in years, I don't have to pretend to be less than I am or more than I need to be. I'm just Clinton Avery, man who fixes things and knows the value of quiet mornings. The cabin has become exactly what I need it to be, a place where success is measured by the quality of your work, not the price of your boots. My neighbors, the few that exist out here, know me as the guy who can repair anything with an engine and makes decent coffee when they stop by. They don't know about Pinnacle Aerospace or Heartland Equipment or the Maria Avery Trust. They just know I'm reliable, honest, and good for conversation that doesn't require pretension. I've been thinking a lot about the letter I never sent. The one I drafted that night in my garage after everything fell apart, full of anger and disappointment, and the kind of words that burn bridges permanently. I'm glad I didn't send it, because anger isn't really who I am. Disappointment fades, but character lasts forever. Last week, I got a letter, not a voicemail or text, but an actual handwritten letter on stationery that cost maybe 50 cents at the drugstore. It was from Lauren, and it was different from all the desperate messages she'd left before. She didn't ask for anything, didn't apologize again for things we both already understood. Instead, she told me about their new life, really new, not just geographically different. Brandon working 10-hour days at the feed store and coming home tired, but proud of what he'd earned. Lauren teaching local farmers about crop rotation and soil management, using the agricultural knowledge she'd always had, but never valued because it wasn't sophisticated enough for ranch royalty. She wrote about discovering that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn through consistency, honesty, and treating every person like they matter. About learning that wealth without character is just expensive emptiness. At the end of the letter, she included a photo. Not a selfie or social media pose, but a simple picture of her and Brandon standing in front of a modest rental house, wearing work clothes and genuine smiles. They looked tired, older, but fundamentally more real than they had in years. She didn't ask me to come visit, didn't suggest we rebuild our relationship on any particular timeline. She just said, "We're becoming the kind of people you taught me to be. Thank you for not giving up on that lesson, even when we did." I keep that letter in my kitchen drawer next to the photo of Maria I brought from Colorado. Sometimes I read it when the mountain silence feels too complete, when I miss being someone's father more than I value being left alone. I don't know if I'll ever go back to being part of their lives. Trust once broken doesn't heal just because time passes. But I do know this. The people who wrote that letter aren't the same ones who laughed while I was mocked for their entertainment. Maybe that's enough for now. Maybe that's how real forgiveness works. Not dramatic reunions and tearful apologies, but quiet growth and the slow rebuilding of character. I have my coffee every morning on the cabin porch, watching sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and possibility. And for the first time in years, I'm not planning anything, not fixing anything, not supporting anyone who doesn't appreciate the gift. I'm just being Clinton Avery, and that, it turns out, is enough. The letter sits in my drawer, unanswered but not ignored. When I'm ready, if I'm ever ready, I know where to find them, and they know, finally, who they're looking for. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the space to become worthy of your love again.